Hi, this is Bob Samuels from Tech Connector. My co-host today is Sean Markin, a co-member of the Northern California B2B Marketers Association and a fellow appreciator of innovative marketing ideas. Sean and I are here with Matt Heinz, one of my favorite marketers, for an impromptu chat. If you don't know Matt yet, you will soon appreciate his wisdom, elegance, and entertaining and educational style. Matt, it's a pleasure to speak with you. How are you today?
I am great. It's always great to see you and always great to spend a little time with you.
Yeah, thank you. So what have you been up to lately? What's kind of fun out there?
Oh, what's fun out there? It's been an interesting year for sure as we sort of record this at the end of 2021. I'm seeing a lot of companies take what the accelerants were through beginning of last year, things that they were kind of forced to pivot around and make a lot more of those fixtures as part of their go-to-market motions. And one of the exciting things for me is I'm seeing an acceleration of marketers embracing revenue responsibility, of marketing leaders learning and understanding and speaking the language of the business versus our insular MQL, SQL acronyms all the time. And so we're seeing, marketing leaders and marketers in general sort of be seen less as cost centers and more as profit centers and real direct revenue drivers as part of the broader go-to-market team, and not just the arts and crafts department. And I think it's one of those things that we've seen as a slow trend over the last several years. I feel like, the last 18 months, we've seen an acceleration of that, which is exciting.
Excellent. So when you talk about accelerants, what are you thinking of?
Well, I think some of it is the pandemic and just the fact that, like we were forced to sort of move away from a lot of traditional playbooks. I mean, I think a lot of marketers had been really sort of field support specialists in the past, like, oh, let's put this event together and let's do this next trade show and let's support the field team going and doing their local, lunch and learns or the local, happy hours. Like those all went away. So we were forced to sort of get a little more creative, but also a little more precise in how we created value and created momentum in certain markets. I also think that there's just a growing unrest among boards and CEOs in marketers that can't not just communicate the ROI of their efforts, but can't speak the language of the business. And it's not just about like the move to digital and the fact that we've got a lot more sort of digital stuff. I actually think non-digital and non-directly trackable efforts are maybe even more important than ever in terms of that combined seamless go-to-market motion. So just because we can't measure it doesn't mean it's not valuable. But if I'm a marketer, I don't really care about the cost of a click. I care about what does it take to get more of my target accounts into an opportunity and to get across the line. And so there's an investment in a body of work that's going to consistently and predictably drive the right business that is way more important than managing line items in a spreadsheet. So I think that narrative, that understanding, that context, we're seeing more marketers embrace that. And those that are embracing that are being brought to the table as an equal business leader, not just a ringleader of marketing campaigns.
I think that's a really interesting point. I'd love to hear more about your thoughts of what are the intangible things, or what are the aspects that can't be measured that are really, in your opinion, or what you've seen driving this performance.
Well, I'll give one, which is brand investment. Like we had in our, Bob, in the CMO community that you're a part of as well. Like we had this broad conversation just a couple of weeks ago about brand measurement, brand management. And there was a very direct correlation with companies that had been investing. I mean, this is not mature necessarily company growth phase, B2B companies and startups that are investing part of their resources and budget into brand are seeing a direct conversion of that brand investment into pipeline and closed business. I mean, very much brand is driving demand. And it's not always like, hey, I drove this click and saw this deal. It's not like, hey, I downloaded this white paper and we closed this 7-figure contract. And so I think there's an understanding that, consumer marketers from the beginning of time have kind of known what they're talking about in terms of sort of doing advertising that doesn't always have a direct measure as a channel, but has an impact on the business. One of the examples of that I've seen a number of good case studies for in the last 2 years and really before as well is sports sponsorships. We're seeing more B2B companies invest in sports. Coupa Software was a major sponsor of the Baseball World Series earlier this year. Fortinet, a cybersecurity firm, has their own golf tournament on the PGA Tour. Highland Software has sponsored Xander Schauffele and put a little logo on his sleeve. A lot of B2B companies do this. And so you watch this on TV, you're like, are really that many of their buyers watching TV? Do that many of their buyers really notice the sleeve? The sleeve is a throwaway. Like what these companies are getting in terms of exclusive content, in terms of VIP events, in terms of special tactics and offers that they can put in front of their best prospects. Like I heard one CMO the other day talk about a PGA sponsorship they did, and they said it's given us literally an 8x ROI that we can measure, and that we have sort of referral trackers and that show, like, you know, we were getting this kind of momentum with the prospect, and then we expose them to X. Now all of a sudden they're a customer, and they're doubling down. They're doing the European tour, and they're doing a bunch of other channels now as well. So I do think there's an over-reliance on digital and over-reliance on direct measurement that is constraining companies from taking advantage of these opportunities that are allowing them to accelerate their impact.
Yeah, I worked for an organization a few years back, and they basically had their own internal studio, and there was always this debate. It was a direct marketer, consumer brand in this case, but there was always this debate with the head of the creative, who understood the balance between, let's do commercials that are more direct response, more triggering, and then let's do more branding commercials that feel good. And he continuously had to fight for that balance. How have you seen companies, and obviously you mentioned a great one, the PGA where there was an 8x return. How have you seen companies sort of make that balance and strike that balance? Because it's hard to sort of go away from something where I can see the numbers on the page and I can talk to my CFO and I can say, this is exactly what we're doing, and here's this other stuff that's a little bit more amorphous, and I'm not entirely sure it's going to work. Can we try it? And it's an expensive investment.
Yeah, well, as opposed to, you know, account-based, whatever we want to call it, from like 5 years ago, when, you know, there'd been elements of that have been happening in successful business for a while, but now there's software, now there's the ability to actually create systems behind it. Like when there weren't many people doing account-based marketing, you kind of had to do a leap of faith. Like we're way past that now. There's many companies that are doing this, right? And so I think on the brand drives demand side, on the sports sponsorship for B2B company side, there are many examples of companies that are doing this. We're also seeing a lot more benchmark data compiled by the analyst firms, and even in some cases by private equity firms, that are showcasing, listen, like here's the difference between the companies in an early stage that invested in brand and didn't. And there's a direct correlation between those that allocated resources towards brand and saw more consistent growth figures. They were more likely to hit their number than those that didn't. You know, I think it passes the sniff test to say, if more of your prospects know who you are, if more of them recognize your name, if more of them assume that you need to be in the consideration of 3 companies when they're going to solve X problem, you're going to get more deals. That's not just direct response. It's not trying to send an email and hoping the 2 or 3% of people that are actively buying see it. There's an upfront investment. And so there's a playbook there, and there's a formula, there's a financial formula that is more of a known entity. And there are playbooks now that exist that are coming from the analyst firms, that are coming from Gartner, that are coming from Insight and Vista, that show how to do this. Now, it's still a little bit of a leap of faith, because I can give you all the templates and tools and all the benchmarks you want, but our business is different, and I really want to see the ROI, and I want to know how many clicks it took. Well, you can do that, but the more you want to control, the more you want to see, counterintuitive, the less you'll be able to do, because you do have to make these broader investments. And it's not just brand, you know, I mean, like these same companies are throwing money at PR, and the same companies that are spending, you know, well into the 6 figures on PR firms and events, you know, are reluctant to invest in brand, when really everything the light touches is brand. And the greater you invest in creating a consistent message targeted at a problem that is prescient, that your customers need solving, the better off you're going to be.
How much do you think the difficulty, I mean, that you just alluded to is a struggle with the definition of what brand is and what it means?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really, really good question. And I'm a sales pipeline guy. So like, I am not a brand expert. But a lot of really smart brand people have told me like everything a light touches is brand, right? This isn't your logo. This isn't your color palette. Like that is a component of it, but who you stand for, what people think of when they think of you. Like you can have the most beautiful logo and artwork in the world, but if your customer service sucks, guess what? Your brand is in part about bad customer service, right? So everything you do well outside of what marketing has a purview direct relationship with is going to impact your brand, right? The way the way people answer the door, the way your service people treat customers when they do house calls. I mean, this is all brand stuff, right? Which should be exciting and terrifying for companies that are thinking about brand. Because a lot of what I just described doesn't require you to do a Super Bowl ad. It doesn't require you to like go have to spend money on the PGA or do like brand advertising. Like if you think of the difference between like having to buy brand advertising to rent attention from people in companies and websites that have it versus creating and owning attention, you see companies that are investing in communities, that are investing in amazing customer service and customer experiences. I mean, look at Zingerman's Deli. I mean, this is one of my favorite examples of all time. Zingerman's Deli in Ann Arbor, Michigan, like a famous deli doing super well. I don't think they've spent a dime on actual brand advertising, but they have a customer service model that has been so innovative and so delightful. An arm of their business is all about training companies on the Zingerman's sort of approach to customer service. So their brand has nothing to do with buying space or putting logos on golfers' sleeves. It's about having something so amazing that's part of what you're known for. And that's an opportunity any of us with a brain and with insights in our customers can start to put together.
Yeah, I'd actually love to hear. I wasn't familiar with Zingerman's Deli. What is their shtick?
It's not a shtick. I mean, basically, it's just that they're super passionate. I mean, they're super passionate about what they do. They do have a really kind of fun, whimsical sort of look and feel in the fonts and the visuals they have, but they've really become famous for their approach to customer service, right? I mean, they literally wrote a book called Zingerman's Guide to Customer Service. It talks about sort of a 4-step process for addressing customer complaints. I'm not going to remember, see if I can get off the top of my head. It's sort of acknowledging the complaint, thanking them for the complaint, sort of, telling them that they're going to document this and we're going to address this with leadership to make sure this doesn't happen again. And 4 is, what can we do right now to make this better for you? Right. So let's see if I get it. So acknowledge, thank them for the complaint, let them know what you're going to do with it next. And what can I do? What can I do right now to make this better? And they said, first of all, by doing those things, you completely disarm them because they're like, what? You care about what I just said? That's amazing. And he said, like 4 times out of 5, when you ask them, what can I give you? What can I do right now to make this better? 4 times out of 5, they're like, I don't need anything. I just want you to know. I want you to know that the napkins are always gone or whatever it is. Right. And so they're not looking for free food most of the time. They're just like, just want you to know. And so that approach, I think, Jay Baer talks about, hug your haters in one of his recent books, which is the idea that like the people that are complaining, the people that take the time to complain, they're passionate about what you're doing. Most of them want things to be better. And there's always going to be trolls. But the majority of people that are going to take the time to complain, to hate, are people that really are passionate about what you're doing. And you can convert them into evangelists. The path from someone that is pissed with you to someone that is going to be an evangelist for your brand can be a short customer service phone call. It could be a short conversation with someone at the counter of a deli. And those opportunities have direct translations for those of us working on B2B brands as well.
Yeah, the line between love and hate is very small. And I think you can, it's easier to take someone who hates you to someone who loves you. Because like you said, there's already that passion there. There's something that's not being serviced versus someone who likes you or is maybe lukewarm, they're using your business, and then take them into someone who loves you. I think that's much more difficult, or in general, much more difficult. But I think it also speaks to something you said earlier, which is the value of community. And I think that is something, it's been something that business and marketing has talked about for a while, but I simply don't generally see people doing it that well. When do you see these raving fans? When do you see people who are like insane for what you're trying to accomplish? And you see something like a deli. Why are we 3 people on the West Coast talking about a deli in Michigan. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But, and something, I mean, and it's not like, I'm in Los Angeles. It's not like we don't have delis here. We have many delis and they're somewhat famous. I mean, and you're, Washington and Bob's in Northern California, like there's tons of delis here, but we're talking about something, many states away. So, the idea that you can build a community and the idea of intentionally building a community and the idea of infusing passion into that community, I think is lost. And I think it's particularly lost on B2B businesses, because it seems like it's, in general, when I talk to people, it seems to me like they think that's a B2C thing. And one, I don't know that B2C is always doing that quite well. I mean, if it's being done well, it's generally being done better by a B2C company, but there's no reason why your fans can't be ravenously passionate. I mean, just go look at programmers. If nobody's more passionate about a specific programming tool or language or whatever than them. I mean, like, that should be part of every strategy. And I struggle to understand, and maybe it's just there's no good pathway to it yet, or no good lessons on how to actually build sort of a ravenous fan base, especially in B2B. But I'm not seeing, are you?
No, I mean, you could make the case that, forever, like it's just human to human. But I would say that, back when our parents were, working and living, there was a far greater wall between work and home. You could not do work unless you went to the office, right? Like if you wanted to keep working, you had to stay at the office. That's where all the stuff was. I mean, even when I started working, my first job, once I left that newspaper, I went to a PR firm. Like there was no VPN, there was no BlackBerries. Like if you wanted to keep working, like you had to stay at the office. And so there was your office persona and there was your home persona. Well, in the last year and a half, especially, as many of us are working in our basement with our pets and our children and our distractions around us, like the lines are blurred. And I think it's a clue to those of us that are sort of still thinking of B2B as something where the building is writing a check and we're speaking to a corporation. Like, yeah, there's corporate interest in mind, but every single one of those decisions is made by a human who is at times irrational, who is at times emotional, who is at times selfish. Right. And if that's not part of your persona, if that's not part of how you decide who's going to be in the buying committee and how you're going to talk to them, you're missing a big part of that. And to your point, like, brands and buildings could care less about community, but people very much do. And I would argue that, if given that people are traveling less and working from home more and not in the office as much, and therefore even further separated from other people in a professional community, creating a sense of a community in a variety of digital formats and a variety of approaches and formats is more important than ever. And doing that well, yes, it takes resources. Yes, it takes time. Yes, it's going to take a period of time to do it and do it well. And so investing in a community for your customers, is that going to help you hit your number this quarter, this month? Maybe not. But over time, that becomes a massive competitive differentiator. Like you want a list of my prospects? You can have the list. You can't have the community. You can't have the brand. You can't have the relationship that I individually or our company has earned with these prospects and customers. And, owning that's, we talked earlier about renting versus owning attention. That's a key part of this, is being someone that your prospects want to spend time from. Going from being interruptive, which is what a lot of marketing looks like today, to being irresistible, to being a brand and being someone that people want to spend more time with. They can't wait to see the next piece of marketing you put out. Like, that is a tall bar, and that is not something you're going to do with your next email, your next webinar. It's going to take a body of work. It's going to take a commitment, an approach that goes beyond marketing. But I think we're seeing many, many examples of companies that are doing just that.
I appreciate the offer. You can send me your customer list to I appreciate that, but I also appreciate what you're saying. It is so interesting to sort of see that. To sort of forget that you're dealing with a human seems to be a B2B sickness that is prevalent. I remember I was working with a well-known B2B firm, and they were doing a campaign to business owners. And it took an unreasonable amount of effort to try to convince them to adjust their messaging to sort of have some emotion to their messaging. Everything was very practical and very, and the approval process went up levels and levels and levels. And I mean, it was insane. I had never seen anything like this. Why? I mean, we're not having puppy dogs in your, I mean, like this is not crazy stuff. And yet
Right.
looking at human drives and human feelings as integrating that into your marketing, that is something that has been foreign, continues to be foreign to so many people. And I mean, it plays into not just, LinkedIn ads and banner ads, but also, like you said, a lack of community and a lack of investment in community. And if you want to fight that, that hyper nimble, very small, agile startup, I mean, build a community and create people who, you can't steal.
Yeah. Hey, you want to go after a Goliath. You want to build a business that shows that it cares about the people behind the building, that shows that it is actually sort of has a heart and wants to build a relationship with people. If you run a business that can't hold a candle to the budget and the resources that these Goliaths are putting out there, like, just start speaking your customers' language, get right to the heart of what they care about, show a level of empathy those big companies can't do because it gets edited away by the legal department before something gets published. I mean, you have so many advantages as an early stage company, because what do you have to lose at that point?
Yeah.
What you have to gain is so much bigger.
100%. 100%. Could not agree more.
Good stuff, guys. So, Matt, it's a pleasure. So, Sean and I both have a finance background. I'm still going back to the branding. I'm still having a hard time with, because I always want an ROI put to things, and right away ROI. And my friend Matt Heinz told me a long time ago, if I can't buy a beer with it, then it's not.
Yeah, but there's a difference. So I mean, Bob, you've seen what we've done with the CMO Coffee Talk community, and it's not pitchy at all. It's definitely not a direct response. I mean, it's on one hand, it's very frustrating that I have people in that community that have been in it for months and yet have no idea that I run a consulting firm that can help them with their marketing. And I got people that I need to make payroll, back here somewhere. So it's so anti-pitching. Like, I've got that going. That said, everyone in that community is in a Salesforce campaign associated with being a participant. So I can see what pipeline is coming from people that have CMO Coffee Talk as at least a contributing attributor, right? And so I don't pitch, and it very much is a long-term effort, but it's become our biggest pipeline source by far.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
So, yeah. So, I mean, so just because I'm not saying, hey, we did this one Friday morning thing, what pipeline? No, I'm not looking at it that way. But as a body of work, like, if I wasn't seeing ROI on it, I'd have to say, okay, well, I got to somehow otherwise monetize or charge for this, and that might ruin it. And then, okay. But I think there's a direct correlation you can make from a body of work, as long as you're tracking it somehow. Even the companies that say they don't put up forms, and like, Latney's whole no forms, no cold calls. It's like, no, they're still tracking you. They still know when you're on your website. They're still looking at intent signals. They've just flipped the game a little bit. So they're no longer putting up arbitrary roadblocks that are purely based on what the seller needs versus what the buyer needs. So anyway, I got to jump into a 1 o'clock call here, but Sean, it was great to meet you.
Great
Bob,
meeting you as well.
Is that your lovely wife I got to see back behind your background there a second ago?
Absolutely. It's
Awesome.
Yeah, that's right. I'll do that. It's a pleasure, guys. We'll
Thanks,
reconnect
guys.
and talk about next steps.
Cool. Thanks, guys. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.